She accidentally wandered into the darkness, and this woman was swallowed by the dark. But that wasn't the scariest part, because this strange darkness was devouring the earth, and even sunlight couldn't escape its grip. This is the 2011 sci-fi thriller film Vanishing on 7th Street. A strange darkness descended upon the earth, and once it locked onto you, you would be swallowed instantly. Today, let's take a few minutes to explore what kind of darkness could be so deadly. The story begins with a mysterious blackout. In a movie theater in New York, the audience was eagerly watching a newly released film. But no one noticed that while they were completely absorbed in the movie, a patch of eerie darkness was slowly spreading from the corners. In the projection room, the staff member Paul was inspecting the equipment. After confirming everything was working properly, Paul quietly left his post and headed to the front desk to buy a coffee, hoping to ask a girl out after work. After getting her answer, Paul happily brought the coffee back to the projection room. But as soon as he entered, the lights in the room suddenly started to flicker. Seeing the dark hallway, Paul thought there was a power outage. He turned and headed to the electrical room to check if there was a problem with the circuit breaker. But on the way there, Paul noticed something strange. The theater, which had been bustling with people, had suddenly become unnervingly silent. Even the audience watching the movie hadn't turned on their phone flashlights. As Paul was wondering about this, the emergency lights suddenly came on, illuminating the theater. But when Paul looked up, he saw an even more bizarre scene. The hallway was littered with abandoned clothes, but there wasn't a single person in sight. Staring at the clothes on the floor, Paul was momentarily stunned. At that moment, a voice called out behind him. Paul turned to see a security guard. The guard also looked confused as he gazed at the empty theater. Sensing something was wrong, the two of them searched everywhere, trying to figure out where the audience had gone. But after searching nearly half the theater, they found no one, only more piles of clothing. Just as they were puzzled, the guard suddenly spotted a shadow moving in the corner and immediately chased after it. Paul was about to follow when a terrible scream echoed through the hallway. Seeing the clothes and flashlight on the floor, Paul was completely shocked. Panicked, he ran out of the hallway, but Paul didn't know. The true horror was only beginning. The next morning, a naked man woke up from his sleep. His name was Luke, a reporter for the New York Times. Seeing the sunlight outside the window, Luke picked up his phone to check the time. But when he turned it on, he found the phone had shut off. Thinking the battery had run out, Luke took the phone to the living room to charge it. But when he plugged it in, he noticed there was no power from the outlet. He thought there was a blackout in the apartment and didn't worry too much about it. After a quick wash, Luke headed downstairs to ask the building management when power would be restored. But when he reached the lobby, he found it strangely deserted. The usually busy front desk was empty, and even the 24-hour receptionist was nowhere to be seen. Luke thought maybe the receptionist had stepped away, so he casually picked up a newspaper from the desk, planning to head to work first. But as he opened the door to leave, he witnessed an even more unbelievable sight. The street was in total disarray, with abandoned cars and scattered clothes everywhere. Seeing the eerily quiet street, Luke sensed something was terribly wrong. As he searched for any sign of people, a plane suddenly plummeted from the sky like a meteor, crashing into the ground. Watching the explosion in the distance, Luke was shaken, with dozens of wild thoughts racing through his mind. Could the United States have been invaded by aliens? Feeling increasingly uneasy, Luke hurried back to his apartment, searching everywhere to see if any other residents were still there. But after searching several floors, he couldn't find a single living soul. Puzzled, he left the building, planning to check the office. But Luke didn't notice that. As he turned, a patch of strange black matter appeared in the corner. Luke soon arrived at the TV station, only to find it completely empty as well. He went to the control room to see what had happened. While reviewing the previous night's news broadcast, Luke noticed something unusual. The anchor had been speaking one moment, but the next moment they vanished into thin air, leaving only their clothes behind. Seeing this on the screen, Luke recalled what he'd seen on the street and realized this was how people had disappeared. He checked more footage and found that everyone had vanished at exactly midnight. And it wasn't just New York. Similar incidents had occurred across the entire US and even around the world. Could this really be an alien invasion? As Luke was wildly speculating, the station suddenly received a video transmission. A man appeared on the screen, urgently warning anyone watching to stay in the light. Hearing the man's words, Luke found it hard to believe. He wanted to write down the man's contact information and call him to learn more. But just as he turned to look for a pen, the lights in the room began to flicker. Before Luke could react, the power in the station was cut. At that moment, a strange noise came from the hallway, and Luke thought there might be a survivor, so he hurried out. But when he reached the hallway, he noticed something was off about the shadows there. Seeing the approaching darkness, Luke remembered the man's warning. Panicking, he backed away and rushed into a nearby room, pulling open the curtains to let sunlight flood in. Even though it was only for a moment, Luke clearly saw a shadow blending into the darkness. Since it was still daytime, Luke decided to head out to the streets to see if there were any other survivors in the city. But not long after leaving the TV station, Luke sensed something was wrong. The sky, which had been bright at noon, had turned dark, and even the sun had lost its light. Seeing the gloomy sky, Luke had a bad feeling. Just then, he noticed lights coming from a bar not far away, and he quickly ran toward it. But when he finally reached the bar, he found it completely empty as well. Frustrated, Luke searched the place and discovered that the bar's power was coming from a generator. After checking the generator, he saw that it still had plenty of fuel, and he figured that when the disaster struck last night, the owner must have started it ahead of time. Unfortunately, the darkness had still managed to swallow everyone in an instant. After running around all day, Luke was exhausted and hungry, so he went to the kitchen to see if there was anything to eat. But as Luke searched, a little boy suddenly appeared from the shadows. Seeing a survivor, Luke was overjoyed. Through their conversation, Luke learned that the boy's name was James, and he was the son of the bar owner. When the disaster happened last night, his mother heard screams coming from the nearby church. Thinking people there were in trouble, she rushed over to help. But after she left, she never came back. Hearing James's story, Luke suspected that James's mother had likely been swallowed by the darkness. He packed some food, preparing to head to Chicago to find the man who had posted the video, but James refused to leave, insisting on staying to wait for his mother. While Luke was trying to convince him, a woman arrived at the bar. Her name was Rosemary, a regular customer, and her family had mysteriously vanished the night before as well. Luke explained to Rosemary about the terrifying presence within the darkness. Hearing Luke's explanation, Rosemary finally understood what was happening. But just as they were talking, they suddenly heard cries for help outside the bar. When they reached the door, they saw a man lying at the nearby bus stop, badly injured. Luke grabbed a flashlight and ran toward the bus stop. The injured man was none other than Paul. Luke helped Paul up and was about to head back, but as they reached the entrance, Luke accidentally fell. At the very moment they fell, shadows appeared on the wall.
Open the door!
Just as the shadows were about to attack, Rosemary opened the door. The light from the bar shone through, forcing the shadows to retreat instantly. Seizing the moment, Luke carried Paul back into the bar. From Paul's account, they finally learned that the things attacking him were indeed shadows. It turned out that when the surroundings became dark, the shadows would gather, making the darkness even deeper. Once the light was completely gone, the shadows would begin to hunt. Before Paul could finish speaking, the bar's lights began to flicker. Luke went down to the basement and after inspecting everything, found that the generator was starting to overload from running too long. Luke realized the generator wouldn't last much longer, and their only option now was to find a safe place. Earlier, when rescuing Paul, he had noticed a car not far from them with its lights still on, which meant the car might still be working. He then told everyone about the video and suggested they could drive to Chicago to seek refuge. Rosemary agreed that it was a good idea. Grabbing 2 flashlights and spare batteries, Luke and Rosemary went to the roadside, quickly found the abandoned car, and when Luke tried to start it, he discovered it still worked. Just as the two of them were about to drive back, a little girl suddenly appeared at the intersection. Luke wanted to take the girl with them, but the frightened child turned and ran away. While chasing her, Luke accidentally fell, and his flashlight rolled away. Without the protection of light, the surrounding shadows surged toward Luke. Fortunately, Rosemary reacted quickly and turned on the car headlights, stopping the shadows from swallowing Luke. But just as Rosemary helped Luke up, the car suddenly stalled, and the darkness once again closed in on them. In a panic, Rosemary and Luke took shelter in a nearby hospital, where they found some alcohol and made a simple torch. With the light from the torch, the surrounding darkness was instantly driven away. They split up to search for more alcohol, but while searching, Rosemary suddenly heard a child crying in the hallway. She turned around and saw a baby stroller by the roadside. Rosemary recognized the stroller. It was her son's. Overcome with emotion, she rushed over, not realizing it was a trap. By the time Luke caught up, Rosemary had already been completely swallowed by the darkness. Helpless, Luke could only drive back to the bar alone, but as soon as he returned, James told him that Paul had been swallowed by the darkness. It turned out that the generator had briefly shut down, and by the time James realized it, only Paul's clothes remained on the table. Hearing James's story, Luke could only sigh helplessly. After quickly packing some food, the two of them left the bar by car. But soon after they got on the road, something suddenly hit the car. Luke looked back and saw that their supplies had fallen out. He had to stop the car to pick them up. As he stood up again, he saw James running toward a nearby church. It turned out James wanted to search for his mother at the church, but the church was pitch black. there couldn't possibly be any survivors. Luke had originally planned to leave alone, but worried about James, he decided to turn back. He drove the car into the church and found a cluster of candles burning at its center. In the dim light, James thought he saw his mother at the center of the church, but as he got closer, he realized there was no one there, only a pile of clothes. Before James could react, the car suddenly stalled. Unlucky Luke didn't even have time to turn on his flashlight before he was swallowed by the darkness. Realizing Luke had disappeared, James could only hide among the candles, trembling with fear. No one knew how much time had passed before a light appeared outside the church. James looked up and saw that it was daylight. Just as he was about to stand up, he noticed a little girl watching him nearby. It turned out this church was the girl's refuge, and she was the one who had lit the candles. At the end of the story, James left the church with the girl. They found a horse and prepared to head for Chicago. But not long after they set off, the sky darkened once again.
To beg you to hold me.
It was clear that the two children would not be able to escape the grip of the darkness, and that concludes the disaster film Vanishing on 7th Street. Overall, the film's quality was decent, though the plot had a few small flaws, and the director never explained the origin of the darkness. Alright, that's all for today. See you next time.